You're listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with Jess Wiener. Don't worry. This is a joyful podcast about life, death, and everything in between. I was 13 years old when I first fell in love. I mean, definitely was like young love. And it was with a boy who was 16. We were friends. Our parents worked together. His stepmom worked with my dad. He was everything that I wanted in my first love. I mean, he was so handsome, but so charming and sweet and really saw me. And I always felt like I wasn't very seen by boys at my age. I was boy crazy. I really wanted to be in a relationship, but I didn't look like a traditional, I didn't think that I looked like a traditionally beautiful girl. I had this sort of unruly curly hair and, teeth that eventually got tamed by braces. But, I was in like a slightly curvier body. At the time, I didn't think I represented what I thought was beautiful. And he thought I was awesome. And we had fun together and we played together. And we had a very short sort of whirlwind romance that was also quite super innocent. But I was 13, he was 16, and I was getting ready to have a bat mitzvah, which is like, huge rite of passage in a young Jewish girl's life. And I invited him to the bat mitzvah, and I was so excited for him to be there because I would have him in front of my friends and I would get him to, meet my friends. And we didn't go to the same school. Obviously, he was a couple years older. And I just was out of my mind excited about seeing him. And his father held a prominent political office when we were growing up. His father was the former state attorney general of Florida. And I had known his family for quite some time, but didn't really think about what his dad did or how his life was in the public eye until one morning, about a couple weeks before my bat mitzvah, I was awakened by my mom and my dad, who sat me down on the bed. And this is all a little bit blurry, but I remember them saying, last night, his name is Bobby. Last night, Bobby's mom died, and so did Bobby. And I couldn't process that as a 13-year-old. It was the first time I'd ever experienced death. I had all living relatives at that point, and my mind sort of swirled with both pieces of information. But what ended up happening, and some of these details are actually not as important as others because I don't want to give it as much time here, but he was murdered by his mom in the middle of a nasty custody battle. And she took his life and then she took her own. And my entire world was rocked. A, had never experienced death. B, had never experienced a murder. And obviously to have this young love sort of, destroyed at that age. Like there were so many things that were happening, but probably the hardest part of all of this was trying to wrap your head around the why, which there will never be an answer for. You can speculate, but you're never going to really know. And what was most important was that he had a private funeral. So the closure part for me didn't exist because his father was in the public eye, and it was right around, I think it was right re-election time for him. The family did a private funeral. I didn't attend that. I actually didn't attend any of the private mourning events for him. So I was left with this really deep space of grief at a very young age. And I can remember laying in bed as a young teenager and constantly going over in my mind all of the possibilities of what it could have been like if he was still alive, not understanding why this happened to somebody so loving and lovely. And I think for the first time was forced quite a bit to grow up and realize that things that we feel change and people that we love die. And sometimes they die in horrific ways, and sometimes you'll never have the answers to it, and it won't look like a movie, and I won't have a beautiful funeral closure. And I, had a lot of incomplete moments and feelings about this. And actually, probably throughout my whole life, I have on and off thought about him and thought about the deep grief of letting somebody go that young, and what that might feel like for his family, what it felt like for me. So he's been a big presence in my life. And, in some ways it is an inspiration for this, conversation, because I know that I'm not unique to having an experience like that. I know that people's fathers and mothers and sisters and beloveds have all been taken, and many times too soon. And I know that sometimes our greatest plans in life, spending it with the people that we love, don't often work out. I think this became really heightened for me when I married Felipe, my husband, much later in my life. I didn't get married till I was 40. And again, I think when I found him and when I, knew that this was my person and my partner, then of course the thought of like, oh my God, what would happen if I lose this person? And a lot of that trauma that I felt as a young girl, losing somebody that I loved and cared about so violently, kind of comes up now and again. And I think in all of the losses that I've experienced over the last couple of years, I think about the aggregate of our life and how we're often taught to love, and we talk a lot about loving, but we don't often get to talk about loss and losing and what it feels like to live through it and come out the other side of it and how that might impact your life. So we're all going to die anyway is somewhat of a pithy comment of reality, right? We are, all born and we all die. And what we do in the middle of that life cycle is our life, right? It's how we spend our life. And I don't know that I ever really thought about that outside of like funerals you had to go to or deaths you read in the obituaries in the newspaper. I think most of us walk around thinking that this won't happen to us, even though we know it will. So I guess in my mind right now, I keep going back to we're all going to die anyway. So what? So what life are we living? So how are we making relationships? So are we doing things because we think we have to do them or because we want to do them? Are we living a life that we feel really proud of? Are we waiting to live? Are we waiting for X, Y, and Z to happen and then we'll live a life that we want? So I think some of those questions are becoming more intensified for me. And I have this incredible knack in my life. I don't know where this comes from. I do feel like this might be my superpower. I just end up collecting and knowing flippin' incredible people. I have my whole life been spent finding people in airports or women's bathrooms or classrooms or dorm rooms people that I have stayed in contact with or developed really amazing relationships with. And there is a family that I want to give a beautiful shout out to called the LaFrances, and especially Andrea and Dave LaFrance. And we met in the airport in the Bahamas when it was getting shut down because of I don't even think it was weather related. I think it was like some technical glitch. But anyway, you really couldn't get out of the Bahamian airport for a period of time. And it was kind of like Lord of the Flies. And we met the LaFrance family while we were waiting on this long line to get rebooked, and everybody was really agitated, but they were the coolest, sweetest, chillest family. It was Andrea, Dave, Connor, Brittany, and Emily, and they called themselves ABCDE, and they were hanging out. So we had lots of hours to get to know each other. Fast forward, this family and I stayed in touch. They came to my, book parties. I went to visit them in their home in Saratoga, New York at the time. And I was also the beneficiary of a phone call from Andrea when at the time her 14-year-old son, Connor, died tragically in a motorbike accident. He was a wonderful motorbike racer, really super talented, racing on a lot of circuits, adventure junkie, really wild, lovely, loving young man. And he died in an accident, and it gutted Andrea and Dave and the family's life. And it also, I think, just as an outside person, opened them up to a new way of living that I've watched them do, which is that they live as though Connor is still here, just right there on the other side of the veil. They speak of him all the time. They don't often speak of him in past tense. When you ask Andrea how many kids she has, she says 3. They speak about him in this honoring way. And for me, after the death of Bobby and before, obviously, I met my husband, I got to know the LaFrances, and I remember thinking that they were handling death in a way that I really admired and that I wanted to emulate in some way, because while it was deeply painful and they didn't ignore the pain, they also didn't let that stop them from living. They did the things that they loved to do. They raised their kids with pure gusto. They didn't shut down, I guess. And I had seen a lot of people who had stopped living when somebody died, and they definitely didn't seem to do that for me, although I certainly don't know what went on inside of them in this process. But they're quite extraordinary people, and they've been role models for me around honoring and celebrating death. They're very open around talking about loss. They plan and have not just living wills, but conversations about what to do when they go and how they want to go and how they want people to celebrate and where they want their scarves to go to or their books to go to. Like they don't hide away from it, I guess. And for me, that's just been a really freeing thing to experience. So when Connor passed, and I think I was traveling somewhere when Andrea called me, and I wasn't able to go to his funeral either, but I wanted to contribute something. And somebody had just put in front of me a poem called The Dash Poem by Linda Ellis. And I read it, and it just absolutely reminded me of the fervor and the passion for living that the LaFrances have. And I sent them the poem, and they ended up using it in Connor's memorial service. They printed it on cards there. And between us, it's become this real mantra for how to engage living a full life. So I wanted to read that and share that poem with you. Again, this is a poem called The Dash Poem by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? That is legit what I want to do with this show. I want to light the fuck up out of our dashes. I want to talk about the things we dare not speak about so that we can normalize them for everybody else. I want to celebrate the love and the loss and the living of our lives. And I want to, most of all, just invite us in to know ourselves a little bit better by hearing each other's stories and those things that brought us to our knees that now bring us together. That's really the good stuff. For me, that is La Buena Vida. The good life for me is having great conversations with people I know and don't know in ways that feel on purpose and giving back. That's how I want to spend my dash. And I'm happy to spend it with you. You've been listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with me, Jess Weiner. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can also watch this podcast by checking out my YouTube channel for filmed episodes, behind the scenes footage, and all other kinds of amazing video goodies. And of course, you can always visit me at jessweiner.com. We're All Gonna Die Anyway is exec produced by me and produced by Lauren Chavez Myers. Our episodes are recorded, filmed, and edited by Jeff Franklin and Adam Lippert of B Film. And our original amazing music is by Becca and Destiny Petrell. As always, I want to send a special thank you to the love of my life, the amor de mi vida, Felipe Lopez. And if you love this podcast, please make sure to tell your friends, subscribe, and leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, if there is something that stood out to you from today's episode, I want to hear about it. So if you want to share your own story, leave a comment, ask a question, please send me an email at podcast@jesswiener.com. I can't wait to hear from you. Bye, babies.